We'll start by setting our motivation. So we'll again use the three principal aspects of the path. And after we do three principal aspects of the path, we'll do refuge and bodhicitta. So just take a minute and get into a reflective headspace, a headspace that is ready for class to go as deeply as possible, to be as integrative as possible, and to be of greatest benefit. Homage to the precious noble masters, the very essence of all the Buddha's teachings, the path that is praised by the noble bodhisattvas, and the entrance for all fortunate ones desiring liberation. To the best of my ability, I shall now set forth. You who are unattached to samsara's pleasures and strive to make full use of the freedoms and advantages. You who follow the path delighting all the Buddhas, fortunate ones, listen well with a clear and open mind. Whilst lacking pure renunciation, there is no way to pacify the continual thirst for pleasure in the ocean of samsara. And since all living beings are bound by their craving for existence, you must begin by finding the determination to be free. Freedoms and advantages are rare, and there is no time to waste. Reflect on this again and yet again, and dispel attachment to this life. To dispel attachment to your future lives, contemplate repeatedly the unfailing effects of karma and the sufferings of samsara. When, through growing accustomed to thinking in this way, hope for the pleasures of samsara no longer arises even for an instant, and throughout both day and night you long for liberation, then at that time true renunciation has been born. Yet if this pure renunciation is not embraced by the pure motivation of bodhicitta, it will not become a cause for the perfect bliss of unsurpassed awakening. So the wise should generate the supreme bodhicitta. Beings are swept along by the powerful current of the four rivers, tightly bound by the chains of their karma so difficult to undo, ensnared within the iron trap of their self-grasping, and enshrouded in the thick darkness of ignorance. Again and yet again, they are reborn in limitless samsara and constantly tormented by the three forms of suffering. This is the current condition of all your mothers from previous lives. Contemplate their plight and generate supreme bodhicitta. If you lack the wisdom that realizes the nature of things, although you might grow accustomed to renunciation and bodhicitta, you will be incapable of cutting through conditioned existence at its root. Exert yourself, therefore, in the methods for realizing interdependence. The one who sees that cause and effect operate infallibly for all phenomena of samsara and nirvana, and for whom any objects of conceptual focus have subsided, has set out upon the path delighting all the Buddhas. The knowledge that appearances arise unfailingly in dependence, and the knowledge that they are empty and beyond all assertions. As long as these two appear to you as separate, there can be no realization of the Buddha's wisdom. Yet when they arise at once, not in turn but both together, then through merely seeing unfailing dependent origination, certainty is born, and all modes of misapprehension fall apart. That is when discernment of the view has reached perfection. When you know that appearances dispel the extreme of existence, while the extreme of nothingness is eliminated by emptiness, and you also come to know how emptiness arises as cause and effect, then you will be immune to any view entailing clinging to extremes. When, in this way, you have correctly understood the key points of the three principal aspects of the path, withdraw to solitude, dear son, strengthen your diligence, and swiftly accomplish the ultimate and lasting aim. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from desire for friends and hatred for enemies. Sangye chodon zoge chonam la, janchu badu dani kapsuchi, Dagi chunyan gi pe sonam gi rola penje sange drupa sho sange chudon sogi chunam la janchu padu dani kapsuchi Dagi chunyan gi pe sonam gi rola penje sange drupa sho sange chudon sogi chunam la janchu padu dani kapsuchi Dagi chunyan gi pe sonam ki rola binche sangye drupa sho. And so just sitting for a moment and allowing that motivation to strengthen, to deepen. Okay. So you can relax your attention. We were just looking at renunciation the last few weeks, and renunciation, this determination to be free, is really an essential foundation and an essential component of every single Buddhist teaching. Whether it's from the Pali tradition or the Sanskrit tradition, all traditions of Buddhism emphasize renunciation. And having that strong determination to be free from samsara, to cut the root of cyclic existence, to end suffering and its causes, is so fundamental. And it's the less kind of exotic, entertaining, intriguing, philosophically complex. It's kind of harder to get engaged with for a lot of reasons. But I think primarily it's because we're addicted to the crumbs of happiness. And it's hard for us to put aside the crumbs of happiness in favor of the pursuit of real, lasting happiness. So we're not renouncing pleasure. We're not renouncing happiness. We're renouncing suffering and the causes of suffering. But the causes of suffering often involve activities that have an immediate, short-term, seemingly positive effect. So it's a little bit like giving up short-term happiness in favor of long-term happiness, which means there is a tiny sacrifice involved. There's a delay gratification involved. There is a maturing that needs to happen. But in so doing, you're taking the power back from your sensory experiences as being your main source of contentment. And you're giving yourself back the mental power to develop that contentment within yourself. So there is an immediate benefit, but there's kind of an immediate sacrifice as well. It means you can't have as much sugar high happiness. You need the deep, nourished happiness that comes from a healthy, well-considered meal. That analogy. So renunciation is essential, and then we move on to the topic of bodhicitta, which is the exclusive realm of the Sanskrit tradition, the Mahayana tradition. People in the Pali tradition don't talk about the Mahayana perspective of bodhicitta, though they do speak very extensively about loving kindness, compassion, different forms of altruism. They just don't frame it in exactly the same way as we do in the Mahayana, which is this pursuit of complete enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. So we're doing a transition from kind of universally agreed upon philosophies of Buddhism into philosophies that are more specific to the Mahayana, which is the Sanskrit tradition. More specifically, of course, we're talking from the Gelug tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. But the Mahayana basically means the aim is full Buddhahood enlightenment, not mere nirvana, mere liberation. Yeah. So that's the main distinction, is the goal is slightly different, therefore the techniques are slightly different. And then we come back to wisdom at the end of the course, which is again universal, although there are various philosophical tenet systems to refine and become more specific about that wisdom. So here we are, three principal aspects of the path: renunciation, bodhicitta, correct view. And We did a lot of talking about renunciation in terms of suffering and its causes, done by examining the first two noble truths. We didn't look at the 12 links of dependent arising, but that's kind of its own course and really fascinating. We did look at the faults of attachment, like the 8 worldly concerns. And the summary of all of that is, in order to have this fundamental shift, you need to, which is the path of accumulation, you need to have uncontrived renunciation. And for a Mahayana path, it needs to also be uncontrived mind of enlightenment. So we looked at this one, number 1, the intention to definitively emerge from samsara, aka determination to be free, aka renunciation. Now we're going to look at the second half of that, which is the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta. So this is the main Mahayana motivation, the mind with 2 aspirations: to become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. This is relative bodhicitta. There's also ultimate bodhicitta. So relative bodhicitta is subdivided into aspiring and engaging, which mean just what you would assume they would mean. Aspiring means you want to, engaging means you're actually doing. Shantideva would say in Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life, it's the difference between wishing to go and actually going. So a person or a being with uncontrived bodhicitta is a bodhisattva, meaning they've achieved this Mahayana path of accumulation or higher, which is the first of these 5 pathway awarenesses one realizes in the process of becoming enlightened, which includes uncontrived renunciation. Okay, so this is what you generate initially, and engaging bodhicitta is when it's firmly rooted through taking things like the bodhisattva vows. So it's not necessarily uncontrived once it's engaging, but engaging really involves a real commitment. So this is where we're at. We're at bodhicitta. And the question becomes, is my spiritual path for others, for all, or is it just for myself? Am I engaging in this process of self-exploration, self-development as an exercise of self-healing, as an exercise of intellectual curiosity, as a thought experiment, and it hasn't really evolved from there? Or am I genuinely thinking every bit of knowledge, every bit of integration, may it have this ripple effect? May it be of benefit to everyone around me, every step along the path? And may I not finish this path until I've completely removed suffering and its causes and completely developed all of the qualities and abilities to benefit people in the most direct, specific way. So what is our reason for practicing the Dharma? And so we have to really sit with that in an honest way, because just because we're in a Mahayana tradition doesn't mean we have a Mahayana motivation. We might just kind of like how fancy it gets here in Tibetan Buddhism with all the smells and bells and accoutrement and pretty deities and, I don't know, nice Tibetan people, and that whole vibe might just be kind of what we like. But the point of all of that is bodhicitta. Right, all of that. And the only reason to practice something like Buddhist Tantra is bodhicitta. That's the reason to practice Tantra, is bodhicitta. If you're practicing it for any other reason, that is not Buddhist Tantra. That is some sort of other situation. Yeah, and may in fact reinforce your samsara and keep you there longer, if done hedonistically or from a mistaken view. So just sit with, why do I do this? Why am I studying this? Why do I put myself through this? You know, is there some part of me that genuinely wants my own development for the sake of others? Or have I let it get a little bit lazy and a little bit insular and just think, oh, well, me first, and if I get myself sorted out, maybe I'll help my neighbors, but whatever, good luck to them. It's an interesting thing to sit with, because we might pay lip service to bodhicitta, but do we actually have even aspiring bodhicitta? Because if you have even aspiring bodhicitta, you're thinking, no one is left behind. No one is cut out from my heart. My path is not finished until every single sentient being is a Buddha. My work is not done until everyone's enlightened. And if we're honest, there are some people that we're kind of like we've shut the door on in terms of our heart. We've written off. We've avoided. And that's not to say you're not allowed to have healthy boundaries. You're not allowed to distance yourself from people who are actively harmful. It's about a mental attitude that sort of cuts people out of your heart or blocks people from your heart. This is a very significant piece that we have to overcome. So, looking at renunciation and then pivoting to looking at bodhicitta, what is coming up for you so far? Do you have some thoughts that arise right away, some resistance or some curiosity or some insights? Yeah, T, go ahead.
Sorry, new headset, Venerable.
Sorry.
Is it working okay?
Yep, it's great.
Thank you for being here, and I'm so grateful to be here with everyone. I do have a troubling question that I'm trying to been sitting with. So when I try to generate heartfelt bodhicitta, um, there's a positive and a negative for me. The positive part is, in my heart, I don't have a problem with really feeling that sense of without one exception. And I do intentionally visualize even people I've had discord with and people in the government, people, all kinds of things. And I really feel in my heart that I have somewhat of understanding. If everyone had less suffering, this is a good thing for the sake of the whole. My problem, Venerable, is when we do like our dedication,
Mm,
and we say something like, and may I too remain. And that's the part that I have kind of a problem with, and it may be a lack of understanding. Because I was really loving your comment last time when you talked about how we're like in a jail, in a prison, and I really love the fact that you were saying about how, and we want to not just be a good person, we want to really be able to cultivate bodhicitta and really ending samsara so we can bring others out with us.
yeah,
And I love that. So it's helping me with issues I've had where I'm like, can I have this path and have relationships and things? And that kind of is helping me as I continue to process that. But the part about may I too remain, I kind of cringe a little bit when we say it. And maybe
yeah.
you can help me with that if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad you brought that up because that's a phrase that comes up in a lot of prayers, isn't it? May I stay until samsara ends. And, even if I must remain for an ocean of eons in the fiery hells of Avicii for even one sentient being, may I achieve the perfection of this and that, there's lots of that in Mahayana Buddhism. And it's one of those cases of this is the attitude to adopt, not what will actually happen. So it's an attitude that you adopt where you think, I am not going to leave this prison until everyone is out ahead of me and perfectly happy and satisfied ahead of me. But that very attitude probably means you'll get out quite soon. But the attitude is that's that really the heart work is not finished until everyone is free. You yourself, however, need to be healthy, strong, out of samsara, already a Buddha, to be in the best position to be of benefit in the most clean, clear way. Even as you help people along the way every step, it's not like you have to wait till you're a Buddha to be of use. You're useful now, you're of benefit now. It'll just grow and grow and grow in terms of your radius of positive impact. But there's these prayers, which are really to get you into this attitude of the marathon mentality that I am in this for the long run, that come what may, my path is altruism. My path is the deepest altruism of bodhicitta. My path is for others. So when you adopt these attitudes, it doesn't mean that it'll be the case. It's just the way to think, which also supports what's called joyous effort. A lot of you know this word, joyous effort, the perfection of joyous effort, which is why you'll also see prayers that say crazy things like, by myself alone. And you're like, really alone, but I would like some backup, please. What about my teachers? What about my community? What about the three jewels? Really all by myself? And you're kind of like, I guess so, it's in the prayer, but it can make you feel a little like, I don't know, plaintive or a little bit like, and this is also an attitude to adopt, not the reality of things. So it's a similar psychology where, say you want to do some positive project over the weekend, and you're making all sorts of plans, and you really want all your friends to come help you. If you say to yourself, I will only do this job if people help me, you immediately have this deprivation mentality that gets a little bit needy and probably repels the very people you need to help you. But if you genuinely have the thought, I would like people to help, however, I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to do it by myself. Hopefully, I'll get help, but I'm not going to bank on it. I'm not going to have that vibe. I'm going to do it this day at this time, come what may. That creates that really abundant energy, which then, when you ask people to help, they want to join you there in that momentum. So, by thinking by myself alone, you won't be alone. By thinking, may I not leave samsara until it's empty, you'll probably leave quite soon. They're attitudes to adopt. So it's a funny kind of psychology that you find in Buddhism, particularly Mahayana Buddhism. But does that make some sense? It's a way to think, even though you know there's other things happening with the story. It creates some internal energetic shift to adopt an attitude like this. It makes some sort of sense, or are you feeling like,
Um, I comprehend the meaning behind it and I'm in solidarity with it. But the word play, I have to, and that's probably because I've come from black and white thinking that
right?
I've had to work through. And so I take things too so literally. I just pour tea sometimes. People like making jokes towards me too. That's okay. But yeah, I feel like I have an understanding. I wrote some notes as you were talking, Venerable. I'll just
Yeah.
sit with that more because my intention right now is when we do the dedication, I don't have that little resistance in me if I can just let that flow
Yeah.
away. So.
Absolutely. And there's prayers that don't have that in it. So if it hangs you up every time, just pick a different dedication prayer. That's always a stopgap. Yeah. Yeah, Barbara, go ahead.
I think my question is a little bit along the lines of teas. It, and it comes from one of the paragraphs in the King of Prayers.
Mm,
And I will read it for you.
nice.
Remembering my past lives in all varieties of existence, may I practice the bodhisattva way, and thus in each cycle of death, migration, and birth, may I always abandon the householder's life. And that is the phrase that it's like,
But I don't want to.
can you help me with that one?
Yeah. And of course, what they mean is it's easier to practice renunciation if you're a monk or a nun, but not that you can't have renunciation if you're a layperson. Of course you can. And there's lots of lay people that have way better renunciation than me, a nun who's been a nun for, 21 years. There's lots of lay people with way better renunciation than me. So, may I always abandon the householder's life is really saying, may I always have a renounced mind. May I always have a renounced mind. And so you can have a household and, pay off your mortgage and have your spouse and have your kiddos and be very conventional on the outside, but be completely radical and revolutionary under the surface. And no one knows. Except they know that you're beautiful to be around for some reason they can't quite put their finger on. And it's because you have renunciation. And it's because you have bodhicitta. So it makes you happy and content with whatever comes your way. And if there's a financial crisis and the stock market crashes and all of your possessions are under threat and all of your stability, carefully crafted, falls apart, it doesn't have the power to disturb your mind. Yeah, so that's the fundamental leaving the householder's life is have a house or don't have a house, be a layperson or be ordained. But really what we're saying is, what is your relationship to objects? to the material world? What are your assumptions about stability that are false? What are your attachment-based expectations, and how do you overcome them? So it's that deep, deep mentality. What you look like or live like on the surface is secondary. Yeah. So if you think renunciation, whenever you hear that verse, then you won't get tripped. Yeah. 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 Thank you for that. Yeah, Jennifer, go ahead.
Let me see if I can explain this. So I personally, as I get more honest with myself and as I move along, I realize that I don't really know how I feel about the idea of being enlightened. It scares me a little bit. But I really like the idea of helping people and the cessation of my mental afflictions.
Mm.
Do I still have some form of bodhichitta if um if I feel those things and work in that way? If I want freedom from my cessation, the freedom from my mental afflictions so that I can help and be of most benefit to myself and others. But the enlightenment part, I'm not quite on board with at this time yet.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good question. I guess the question becomes what about enlightenment scares you? Is it the thought of omniscience? Is it the thought of not having a form or being or taking different kinds of forms more voluntarily, or just it's kind of overwhelming?
It's the omniscience. I feel like that would be painful and scary. And I feel like maybe later in life or in future lives, when I get to that point, maybe
Yeah.
it wouldn't be so scary, or maybe it would be like in steps, like I would change, maybe I'd become omniscient, like not like that, like maybe it would be like in steps. That's what I thought. Maybe
Yeah,
I'd be like I would be like a little more omniscient, but not all the way omniscient,
yeah,
So
yeah.
I could like
I trade it.
feel it out, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
I do.
that's like,
True. And I think maybe what you're speaking to is the difference between worldly clairvoyance and actual omniscience. So,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So, like, if we got some form of clairvoyance, say we did a big purification practice and we cleared the cobwebs, but we didn't have any particular realization other than riding the wave of some samadhi that we'd created in previous lives, we had some sort of magical clairvoyance arise as we are, in our ordinary way as we are. And there are people in the world like that, right? Who have some very coarse clairvoyance where they have a very gross sense of what people's general personality is like, aspirations are like, and one half step into the future might be. There's some, there's coarse forms of clairvoyant people out there who may or may not be altruistically motivated, who may or may not be overwhelmed by that knowledge. And that's not what we're talking about. We're talking
Yeah.
about the omniscience that comes from a purified mind, which would not be overwhelming to such a mind,
Okay. So
right?
it most likely would not be just one day I'm
No,
omniscient about everything everywhere.
no, no, it would be gradual. And
Okay.
and it's also like okay, so just think of ourselves as we are right now with our
Yeah.
conditioned intuition. Yeah, we have conditioned intuition. We have a sense of people that is not totally under our control, but isn't totally out of our control either. We're just adult people who have observed humans, right? We're just adult people who have observed humanity. And so, certain body language, we can make an accurate guess if someone is angry or happy. We don't have clairvoyance, but we can make a very accurate guess, generally
Yeah.
speaking. Yes. So that's a skill that you've learned through the course of your life that you didn't necessarily have perfectly refined as a child. And so realizing that someone was angry or realizing that someone was happy was more of a shock or was sort of less clear to you when you were little. And too much of that information might have been too much for you if you were little. You grew into your intuition. in a way. And you sort of were able to integrate it. And so now you have strategies for the information that you receive. And that's a
Okay.
little bit like how the path to enlightenment will be, that as the
Okay.
awareness becomes clearer, so also the skills to process it.
Okay.
Right? So it's
Yeah.
not going to be all at once. It's not going to be overwhelming. But, sometimes even just our ordinary intuition gets overwhelmed by too many, feedback from too many people. Like if you're in a grocery store and everybody's stressed, maybe you went to Black Friday sales. I don't know, and you couldn't read everyone's mind, but you could feel their attachment and their stress and their entitlement and their consumerism, and all of that was just a big jumble of overwhelming energy. And you went to the crazy sale because you really needed a new vacuum cleaner, and then you got home and you're just exhausted and just had to sleep the rest of the day. Can you imagine some situation in your life like that?
Yeah.
Right. That would be like worldly clairvoyance. Yeah, like an analogy for worldly clairvoyance. An example for omniscience that a Buddha would have is when you're really, really well rested, you've had a really good night's sleep, you've had really solid, healthy food to eat for a long period of time, you're feeling at your best, and you walk into someone else's family drama, not your own, right? Someone else's family drama, and you know them a little bit, maybe it's a family friend, but you have enough mental space that when you see the dynamics play out, you can just kind of look for, where can I be of help and where do I need to just shut up? Where do I dive in and try and sort out some conflict using my mediation skills? And where is it just a lost cause for today because people are too agitated? When you have enough objectivity to make really skillful choices because the stakes aren't too high for you and you are at your best groundedness. Yeah. So, if it was your own family, you'd be swept up. Or if you hadn't slept enough, their drama could pull you off course, blah, blah, blah. But when you're a Buddha, you're not suffering and you're not ignorant. So getting all of the knowledge that exists is not going to freak you out. Right? Yeah. It's a good thing to sit with though. And doubts like these are really useful because they usually are some gateway to the next level of knowledge. So really like let yourself have these kind of doubts. They're really, really helpful. Yeah. Yeah, other bodhicitta and or renunciation thoughts coming up for you guys. Little connections and insights or stuck spots. Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
Um, you mentioned that in some you mentioned that in some traditions it's I become a Buddha for myself, and in that process it does benefit other people, right? And then there's the Mahayana tradition where I become a Buddha for other people, right? And I myself will do it. But you also said something that makes me kind of wonder. I have to become a Buddha though with other people as well, right? Because they're my teachers. Whether they're teaching me nice things or whether they're teaching me patience, I have to become a Buddha with them, right? So it's not just for them, but it's also with them.
Yeah, whether they are intentionally being your teacher or unintentionally being your teacher, right? We absolutely need sentient beings in order to become enlightened, and also, that is the way to think. It really is that kind of gratitude and gratefulness that without the hardships in my life, I would not have the patience and resilience I have now. Without the kindness and compassion I was offered at vulnerable times, it would be much harder for me to offer that same sort of compassion towards others now. Blah, blah, blah. So, yes, we need sentient beings, 100%. But when we're talking about liberation for one's own sake, we don't even call that Buddhahood. We just call it mere nirvana, which means a state beyond sorrow. So suffering has been ended, you're abiding in peace, you're causing no trouble, and that would be great if everyone got that far. We'd be really cooking with gas, right? But the problem there is that in a way, you're not repaying the kindness of all of the sentient beings through whom's interactions you became more developed and integrated. You're not repaying their kindness by thinking, How can I offer them tools to free themselves from suffering, just as I have been freed from suffering? You're not paying it forward. You're just kind of like, thanks, gang. Anyway, I'm going to abide in the extreme of peace. Good luck to you. I'm going to not cause trouble, but I'm not going to help either. And that is what's called subtle self-cherishing. So right now we have coarse self-cherishing, which is the main obstacle we have to bodhicitta. And negative self-cherishing that we talk about in Buddhism is that, self-centeredness that is either just indifferent to others or works for our welfare at the expense of others. It can be, kind of coarse or subtle even on this level. But once you've achieved nirvana, you're not being indifferent to others in a sense that you're pushing them out of the way. It's just that you're passive in working for their welfare. You would do nothing to hurt them ever, but it's not proactive kindness. So there's something, from our perspective, there's something problematic in that worldview. It's sort of like you've taken for granted all of the gifts of your lifetimes and just kind of been happy there. And we want this Mahayana motivation that's continually wanting to pay it forward. That, everything we are, everything we have is a dependent arising from countless causes and conditions of other sentient beings. So we don't really have ownership of our qualities. We have qualities, but not real fundamental identity of them. They are not of us, right? They're just what happens when a mind like this comes across conditions like it's come across. So bodhicitta is using the way the mind works in its best form, which is that the mind will do whatever it's trained to do. So it starts as a thought, or what's called a mental factor, just a thought that thinks, may I become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings? Yeah, may I achieve this mind's fullest potential so I can be of best benefit. However you phrase it, it's a thought. And the more you repeat the thought while believing the thought, while having different ideas to reinforce the thought, that thought actually becomes a main mind. It shifts from being a mental factor to being a primary consciousness. So it's like you've had this fundamental cognitive shift, but it's not the brain, it's the mind. But if it were the brain, it'd be like you developed a new neural pathway, but it's subtler than that. It's actually the mind itself. So this is what we talk about when we say a pathway awareness. The 5 paths, they're not external paths, they're pathway awarenesses. And they're achieved when something becomes uncontrived. But to say uncontrived means it's become merged with your main mind. That means you don't have to stop and think about it for it to come up. It's there naturally and effortlessly and spontaneously. And it does that because of the habituation that preceded it. So it really is practice makes perfect, genuinely. And so if we achieve nirvana, but we think I want enlightenment, then nirvana is no problem. But if we achieve nirvana and decide to then just rest there, we're abiding in the extreme of peace, and we haven't overcome our subtle self-cherishing. So I don't know if that answered your question. Did you have a follow-up or?
No, that was great. Thank you, Venerable.
Yeah. So it's important to make it personal, but also to reflect on when have you ever changed your mind about something? When have you ever changed your behavior that was habitual? You probably have, but not very often. All right. When you have done a fundamental change of behavior or a fundamental change of thought, there was some sort of light bulb moment, but then that light bulb moment got reinforced by your remembering it a lot. Yeah. So we need the light bulb moment to occur, and we probably already have in some way when we met the Dharma, maybe even when we just came across the idea that thought transformation was possible. Yeah, or that mental progress was possible, or that getting out of samsara was possible, maybe. But maybe it has to strike us also of how deeply beneficial we can be to each other. Maybe you have to see the impact of your practice on your friends and family, watching their faces relax when you're present with them with compassion. And that somehow that knowing gives you the momentum to repeat and repeat and repeat. But it could just as easily be an experience of how your own heart opens, your own body relaxes, your own thoughts become calm and clear when you stop having anger drive your action, or you stop having attachment guide your decisions, even for a moment or a day or a minute. The way that's of huge benefit to you. So what you want is to try and think of some times when transformation has struck you, and then how to repeat that is really the remembering on purpose. Remember on purpose. And what is meditation? To familiarize. That's what the word means in Tibetan, right? Gom, to familiarize, to repeat. So it's something that has touched you, but you don't leave it at that. And I think the problem with adult learning and the problem with intelligent people is that we really feel so certain that once we've understood something, we are done. And then we keep repeating the same lesson again and again and kicking ourselves because we already knew that, whatever that was, right? We already knew that. Why am I doing this again? I already knew that that doesn't work when talking with people. I already learned that that doesn't work with blah, blah, blah. Why do I do it again and again? It's because we haven't familiarized it with this intentional process of meditation such that we fundamentally change. So, relearning and relearning, if you make it purposeful and intentional, on the cushion or off, it doesn't have to be on the cushion if that's not your style, but it's like remembering your life lessons on purpose and keeping them forefront means they can eventually shift from a mental factor to a main mind. They can shift from being contrived to uncontrived, from being conceptual to being perceptual, right? That switch over happens through repetition. Ladon, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Venerable. I have a question about like how can I explain it? When you know yourself that you have some neurotic attitude, because the life made you what you are, because life is difficult, or like with kids, and you see that you are like coming every day to meditate or everything, and you become like you recognize yourself with your default mode, and you go to the Dharma center with this, and you want it, and then you become detached, and you again you become passionate. Like it's I wanted to you to share your experience that when you began, is it normal, or is it like um, we have to go overcome this, or we need to continue with ourselves, like being nice with ourselves, that I know you are like this in life and in Dharma practice, so go and continue, or there is something to cut through the ignorance, like some magic method or something.
I mean, are you asking how to not be frustrated with yourself?
Yeah, because like I know that you need to have bodhichitta. We need to have to think about and as adult, as a parents, sometimes I'm very passionate with my kids, and then I said, oh, it didn't work. They don't think as the way that I think, so I just distant. I become detached, and then with like the idea of having a teacher, or like I'm meeting some precious teachers and Rinpoche and whatever, Dalai Lama, that I had the chance to meet twice, like when I was in Paris, I become very like joyeux effort
Again, yeah,
became very strong. And
yeah,
then like I said, you see, there's nothing happening, so let it go. And then I come back, and
yeah. And again and
sometimes I
again,
say, death is coming. What? Why are you playing like this?
yeah. Yeah, it's really natural what you describe. It's really natural that you're inspired, you're on a roll, and then the habits of life take over. You
Mhm,
see yourself get frustrated. You don't want to be frustrated, and so
mhm,
you just check out.
mhm,
And that is
mhm,
not what is
exactly.
meant by detachment, right? That is not detachment. That's dissociation or disengagement, right? That is not detachment. Detachment means you have enough space to be fully engaged without being reactive. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm,
Non-attachment means you have broken the spell of your attachment. Attachment lies, so you must
mhm.
break that spell,
Yeah,
or all of your expectations will
yeah.
constantly be thwarted, and you will be so annoyed all the time. And that is how we are. We're so annoyed all the time because we keep having expectations of people that are
Mhm,
impossible for them to meet. And then we blame them for our feeling, right? So if you can really sit with what is attachment like for me, because attachment has a direct role in these expectations you have of people behaving a certain way, or coming to meet you where you believe, all
mhm.
of these things. And it's like expecting them to have had all of the lessons of your life. Yeah, like they're supposed to have learned all of the things that you've learned because they're there in front of you and you're trying to explain it to them, as if it
Mhm,
was that easy to inject people with insight, right? If that was
mhm,
possible, the Buddhas would do that for us, right?
mhm.
They'd be like, here's what I've learned. Boop, now you're done, right? How wonderful it would be, right? But you cannot inject anyone with your insight. You cannot force wisdom on people. You already know this, but you have a tiny expectation or a giant expectation.
Always, yep.
By explaining it clearly and logically and from the heart, people will get it and change. And that seems like a reasonable expectation to have, but look
Mhm,
at your life so far and see that it's actually not.
mhm,
Right?
mhm,
But we do, as nice people, think if I explain it clearly, if I'm kind and skillful, people will understand and take on my advice and fundamentally change. No, they won't.
no.
No, they won't. Right? How many times have you tried and failed? Right? So a better expectation is to feel that saying we have in Buddhism of, okay, I planted a seed.
Mhm,
Someday it will sprout. I don't have control over when it will sprout, but I will plant as many seeds as I can and let it go because
mhm,
it's not my garden.
mhm,
Not even really my seed. I'm just a condition for them creating their own seeds. So detachment is being realistic. Disengagement and disillusionment and disassociation just means you've checked out. You've just
mhm,
escaped the disharmony of the moment and you've gone into la la land because life is too hard.
so true.
Right? Or you've just turned to stone, or you've turned to wisp, clouds, depending on your personality. But that is not Dharma practice. That is just escapism. So look at your relationship to attachment as your main
Mhm,
project.
mhm.
That is your mission, should you choose to
Yes.
accept. And
Yeah,
if not,
yes.
I will still love you. I'm just planting seeds. Right. Yeah, Jennifer, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, good
So
luck.
I have a comment on what you were talking about bringing your mind back to the object in order to change your mind.
Hmm.
Um, so would this technique, I guess it's meditation, right? Familiarizing the mind. Would this technique work for like very negative thoughts? Like I occasionally get very negative thoughts. And then on the flip side, I've had extremely positive thoughts negating
Mm,
these very negative thoughts. That's like the absolute opposite of it. And
mm.
I don't really know which one is true and which one isn't. And therefore it makes a little bit more sense for me to try to believe the positive one. It would that work if I kept bringing my mind back to the positive one? Would that with either
Yeah,
in or out of formal meditation, would that help to change my mind?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the ways to learn which to trust is to look for where is there agitation and where is there not agitation. Because a positive thought that is healthy and constructive will also carry with it a calm, whereas a negative state of mind will always have some sort of agitation with it, even if it's just a low level anxiety. Yeah, there'll be a shakiness. So if you're trying to make a decision from a place of calm. So that can sound quite simple on the surface, but of course, your negative thoughts can co-opt brilliant things you've said to yourself when you've been in a good space and like use them for their own because the mind is complicated, right? But if you can really sit with where is my deepest truth and start practicing that type of self-awareness that notices when you are your most sane and your most content and your most calm and get used to trusting that voice.
Are you implying that the calm, happy, um positive thoughts are more true than the negative ones? Are you implying that
Yes,
that's probably true? Well,
yes.
that means a lot to hear that from you. Okay, very
Yeah.
cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have
Yeah.
to give that a shot. I'll have to
Yeah,
give
and
it a shot.
let that sit a little bit. And
Yeah.
when we get to the wisdom section, we'll talk about more reasons why that is true. But
Okay.
yes, the positive thoughts are more true than the negative thoughts. Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Scarlett, and then we'll have a short break and do a meditation. Scarlett, please go ahead.
Hello, Venerable. I've been trying to put my mind works sort of like in a structured way of, okay, how do we put all these things into practice, like dependent arising and all the other things we talked about, like how does it all fit? And so what I'm kind of understanding is that it feels like the end goal or enlightenment is all about understanding your interdependence
Mhm.
on everything, and things occur based on this interdependence, so this dependent arising. But like I find like I don't have that wisdom every minute, every second to see what the interdependence is and what the dependent arising is. Hence, then my mind then has like like what some of the people here have been talking about, like the afflictions arise because I can't see it. I can't see how the yeah. Can you please speak to that?
Yeah, yeah, it's really important, and especially in the beginning of like deep study of Buddhism, there's a lot of pieces and the big picture isn't clear at first. And then you get the big picture, but it's a little fuzzy, and you then work on sharpening different areas until you get the whole schema. And so that's just something to be patient with and playful with and curious about. But you're quite right that it really boils down to understanding and then responding to the fact of interdependence. Very much so, that can be the heart of practice. So, do you need to know the whole story of cause and effect, the whole story of interdependence in order to act from wisdom or bodhicitta? No, you don't. You can just make an educated guess at your level that what you do has an impact and why you did it came from many, many causes and conditions. So you're taking responsibility without over identification. So If you do a positive action, you know it was not done alone. You're happy about it, but you don't have pride. Just confidence that your mind can go in positive ways. If you do a negative action, you don't fault yourself. You don't say that you're bad. You know it came about through countless causes and conditions. And so you need to purify it so it doesn't create an obstacle, but don't think of it as you. Yeah. And so it's a little bit like thinking everything or all sentient beings is a little bit like how you think of your whole body. It makes sense for one hand to look after the other, but you know that they're two different hands. Yeah, you know that you are a different person than I. I am not you, you are not me, but we are as interconnected as my two hands. And so if one of them has a cut, this one will go and help clean it and bandage it and nourish it. And then later, this hand won't say, well, what have you done for me lately? Yeah, why don't you help me? I always help you. Darn left hand, right hand war. That would be ridiculous. Yeah. So you go to where there is vulnerability and you soothe it. You go there to where there is strength and you support it. This is how to think of humanity, as if we were just all parts of one body. And from a distance, you can say that's just one thing, but the closer you get, the more you realize it's parts and parts and parts that are all fundamentally linked. So your response being compassionate is lovely and also wise. It just makes sense to be compassionate. It's not just a sweet way of being. It has some deep logic to it. Does that help?
Yes, it's helpful because as you were talking, I was just thinking, is purification a real thing, or is it just like I'm beginning to understand everything is mind, right? Everything is my projection. So if the me is purifying, is there some sort of psychological happening that synchronizes things?
Yeah.
That's kind of where I am.
Yeah, I mean, when we get into wisdom, you'll find that there are different philosophical tenet schools, and you're speaking for, like someone from the mind-only tenet school, which is not quite subtle enough, but is going totally in the right direction. We want to try and wind up at the middle way consequence school view, which doesn't say that everything is mind, but does say that everything dependently arises. So it's subtle, but our relationship to form is something interesting to start considering. And our relationship between mind, energy, and form is also something interesting to start considering. But purification is the idea that these mental seeds, these mental karmic seeds on your mental continuum can be rendered powerless to give you suffering. And if you do the four opponent powers with a genuine mind, you are interrupting that cause and effect relationship. It is real. It is real, but it's real with terms and conditions applying, right? Terms and conditions meaning it has to be genuine. It has to be from your heart, not just checking boxes, saying the prayer. You know, it has to be a genuine, yeah, I really regret that action. That is a fault. And not guilt that then says, well, if I feel bad about it, that makes up for it. No, not that. Just clean regret that goes, oh, that wasn't the right thing. I shall now correct. And then a remedy, and you connect with refuge, and then you make a very short promise to yourself to change in the future, something you can achieve, even from the perspective of like cognitive behavioral therapy that changes the way you live in the world. But on the karmic side, it actually does interrupt these patterns. So belief in karma, like we talked about, is extremely hidden phenomena. So at this stage, it relies on belief in the Buddha as being a valid being, understanding of the natural world and how we've seen cause and effect play out biologically, and then also asking ourselves, is there a benefit in using this as my working theory? Or would it harm something to do so? So you use one of those three strategies or all of them, and then you proceed with your purification in as heartfelt a way as you can, knowing it's going to have some benefit in some way, whether it's as deep or as profound as the teachings describe. We won't know that directly for quite some time. but you can see the immediate benefit in your daily life just by starting to experiment with it. You can see behaviors change, and you can see your heart opening relatively quickly if you bring consistency and connection to the practice. So just kind of play with it, no pressure, just experiment and just see, and then you maybe prove it to yourself over time.
Thank you so much. Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right, let's have a 3-minute break and then we'll do our meditation.
Thank you, Venerable.
Adjust your cat if you have one. Uh-oh. Sorry, 1 minute. Okay. There we go. She knows that I'm about to do a meditation, and she knows that's a great lap time. All right, so just take a minute and get yourself a nice straight back. Feel settled in your space and supported by your seat. And we'll revive refuge in bodhicitta in English this time. I go for refuge until I am enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By merit that I create from giving and other perfections, may I attain the state of a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By merit that I create from giving and other perfections, may I attain the state of a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By merit that I create from giving and other perfections, may I attain the state of a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings not be separated from higher rebirth and the bliss of liberation. May all sentient beings abide in a state of equanimity, free from attachment and hatred, free from holding some close and others distant. To my root guru, the quintessence of all refuge objects, I go for refuge. Please bless my mind with your transforming powers. To my root guru, the quintessence of all refuge objects, I go for refuge. Please bless my mind with your transforming powers. To my root guru, the quintessence of all refuge objects, I go for refuge. Please bless my mind with your transforming powers. And visualize on the crown of your head, seated upon a white lotus and moon disk, is the protector, root guru, Chenrezig. He is white in color and has one face and 4 arms. The first 2 hands are joined together at his heart and hold a wish-fulfilling gem. His second right hand holds a crystal rosary, while his second left hand holds a white lotus. He is seated cross-legged in the Vajra posture, clothed in fine garments, and is adorned with precious ornaments. The syllables Om, Ah, Et, and Hum at his 3 places emit light that invites Guru Chenrezig from his natural abode. Guru Chenrezig dissolves into the Guru Chenrezig at my crown, who becomes the essence of the 3 refuges. And so just take a minute and stabilize that. Feeling Chenrezig present, radiant white, made of transparent light, above the crown of your head, seated the same direction as you. This Buddha that you've imagined, one with the actual Chenrezigs, one with all of your teachers. And offer the 7 limbs. I prostrate with body, speech, and mind in faith. Each and every offering I make, including those really performed and those mentally transformed. I confess all negativities collected from beginningless life in samsara. I rejoice in the virtuous actions of all ordinary and noble beings. Please, Buddha, by living as our guide until samsara ends, reveal the teachings to all sentient beings. I dedicate my own virtues and those of others to the great enlightenment. By the virtue of offering to you, assembly of Buddhas visualized before me, this mandala built on a base resplendent with flowers, saffron water, and incense, and adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon, may all beings share in its good effects. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniyatayami. To Arya Chenrezig, whose body is pure white, unstained by defilements, whose head is adorned by the fully enlightened Buddha Amitabha, to you whose gaze upon all sentient beings with eyes of boundless compassion, I prostrate. And so visualize a stream of the 5 kinds of nectar, white, red, blue, yellow, and green, pour from the heart of Chenrezig, enters the crown of my head. And the nectar is purifying all delusions, obscurations, and their latencies, and I receive all the blessings. And so stabilize that visualization. The 5 kinds of nectar, purifying anger, attachment, ignorance, pride, jealousy, and blessing the mind with all forms of wisdom. Holding that visualization, we add the mantra. Namo Ratnatrayaya Namo Vajrayana Sagara Verochana Vuharatsaya Tatagataya Ahate Samyak Sambuddhaya Namo Sawa Tatagate Be Ahate Be Samyak Sambuddha Be Namo Arya Avalokite Shoraya bodhisattvaya, mahasattvaya, mahakarunikaya, tayata om dara dara, diri diri, duru duru, ite vate, sale sale, prasale prasale, kusume kusume, wari ili mili siti salam hapanai soha. Mani padme hum, 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 mani padme hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. And continue the mantra under your breath, together with the visualization. Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 And we dedicate, may I quickly become Arya Chenrezig and lead all sentient beings to his enlightened realm. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. And Chenrezig then dissolves and absorbs into you, blessing your body, speech, and mind. And you can relax your attention. So that's just a short Chenrezig meditation you can do, can help settle and connect with bodhicitta. So, that one is a tantric practice that's open to everyone because there is no self-generation. So that's completely fine for anyone to do. If you feel connection, please do. The mantra is basically the integration of compassion and wisdom. And so I'm sure many of you know that mantra so well, and it's one of your favorites, but just a reminder. So for next week, we're going to be doing a little bit more on the difference between self-cherishing and self-grasping and some Tonglen. But if there's things that you're curious about or want to emphasize, I'm really open to pivot if there's something related to bodhicitta that you've been wanting to ask. And anything about the 5 paths that is starting to come clear, but you're not sure if you've understood it perfectly yet or not, or at all, that's also fine to bring up. So just to kind of review what we talked about already tonight, so it's clear, this slide, that this bodhicitta, this mind of enlightenment, when it's contrived, it's a mental factor. It's a thought. You already do it. And then through repetition and deep contemplation, it eventually becomes uncontrived and spontaneous, a main mind. And that main mind becomes what is called a path or a pathway awareness. So with renunciation and bodhicitta, then you have what's called the path of accumulation. And then you really start to develop calm abiding and special insight in an in-depth way, which is basically the 2 strategies of meditation in their more refined forms. So basically effortless single-pointed concentration and the type of analysis focused on reality. So these developmental stages or these pathway awarenesses, these are really when there are significant shifts in your spiritual path. So the ones that we're working on right now are renunciation and bodhicitta. And whatever is up for you in any given day, go with it. But really make sure you're having some kind of thought project about deepening renunciation and deepening bodhicitta, even if just intellectually to try and decide if you want to integrate them or not. Um, and doing a practice like Chenrezig, it's a way to kind of clear if you're getting too many words in your head, but you still want to connect deeply with the essence of something like bodhicitta. Doing something related to a deity and a mantra can be a really beautiful way of having merit and integrating these ideas if you've overanalyzed. Yeah, if you need to kind of let analysis rest for a while. But other times you might want to go deeply into the analytical side. So just kind of feeling what you need on any given day. Do you have any questions before we call it a night, or any thoughts? Yeah, Jai, go ahead. Oh, and then Cynthia, which one? Yes. Jai, then Cynthia, go ahead. Hello?
Oh, should I go
Yeah,
ahead? Cynthia, sorry I couldn't show my video. I have a low internet connection. I just have
sure.
a quick question on the intention. So when we do a daily, like I have a daily practice in the morning where I do intention so that my actions could be like I try and make it positive. Is that sufficient for the entire day? Like when or do I is it more powerful if I do it as well for every action?
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean,
Thanks.
yes, yeah, thanks, Cynthia. It's good to have a powerful morning launch, and then throughout the day to touch back into it in simple ways, which are just thoughts you bring up on purpose, ways of really inviting deeper self-awareness all throughout the day. So you don't necessarily need to sit, it doesn't necessarily need to be formal, but a conscious choice to touch back into that bodhicitta motivation all throughout the day is really important. But it definitely helps to do, as you say, in the morning, and to really set a very clear intention that you can then tap back into as the day goes on. And then at the end of the day, just checking in, where were the good hours or the good chapters of the day, and where were the chapters of the day that you've kind of slipped or you got a little wound up, and what was around that. That's a really useful reflection that we can all do, and add Vajrasattva to that. Solid practice.
Thank you, Venerable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Jai, sorry, go ahead.
No problem. Just wondering, with the slides that you're putting up, do we have access to those?
Sure, yeah, I can send them to Venerable Dundrup, and he can send them to you guys. Sure.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Venerable, if you could send them to me, or you could send them to Venerable Dundrup, we can get them in the thing.
Who is talking? Is it Michael?
Michael. Yes,
Michael.
sorry.
Sure, no worries. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not, I'm on there squared right now.
Gotcha. Absolutely no worries. Okay. So just have some thoughts about bodhicitta this week, and just some thoughts about also when you've heard this teaching before, if you've heard this teaching before, where do you get stuck? Because those can be really juicy doubts, really helpful doubts. So let yourself have doubts, even invite them, because we have to figure out what blocks this good, kind heart that you already believe in, that you already think is a good thing, but doesn't arise and flow as naturally as you'd want it to. So what makes you stuck is a good question to kind of invite from yourself, just as you're going through the week, and then touching back into that next week. So we'll go ahead and do our classic bodhicitta dedication. Some of you will know this from Shantideva's Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life. Thinking all of the energy we put into this class, may it go towards these aims. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind baked down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain, to dispel the miseries of the world. All right, thank you everyone. Have a good night.
Many thanks.
Thank